welcome back to Book and Page. We are just over halfway through Beowulf now. And we are killing monster number 2 today. Let's jump right into our summary of what happened in these sections, and then we can talk about violence and the cycle of violence. This is getting less exciting the more I try and sell it. Excellent. So, last time, Grendel's mother made an appearance and stole back her son's arm, as well as killing one of Hrothgar's favorite thanes. Hrothgar speaks about this loss. We do get an identity for the thane. It turns out he's a battle brother of Hrothgar. They have fought side by side for many years, and this loss is actually very deeply wounding for the man. And he explains to Beowulf the presence of Grendel's mother, that they had 2 monsters roaming about, one of which was in the shape of a woman, the other was larger and more aggressive, that would be Grendel, so they really only considered the one a threat and not the other. Whoops! Our mistake. Will you go and kill the second monster? And Beowulf's just like, got it. Because what he says is it's better to actually avenge your fallen friends and family than it is to mourn them. So he will for sure head out into the fens, hunt down this beast, and kill her. So a bunch of them head out. It's not just Beowulf on his own. His companions are heading out, along with men of the hull. And they track sort of the blood and gore out to this lake in the fens. And it's full of sea monsters, which quickly start swimming away when all the men show up. One of them, though, is a slower swimmer, and one of Beowulf's companions shoots the sea monster. They pull it out and examine it. Also, we've possibly found the thane's head just hanging out by the lake, which confirms we got the correct lake. So Beowulf gears up for war. He puts all his gear on and jumps into the lake and starts swimming down to the bottom. And it takes him a while to get to the bottom. The statement is the space of a day, but that's not translated well. The footnote on that one is to say it was daylight by the time we got here, right? Because it was night when Grendel's mother burst in, and it was still night when they were discussing these things. And we know that for sure because we do get a timestamp later, and the events that follow in this section take about 9 hours. So we're definitely not seeing like an entire day for Beowulf to get to the bottom. It's just a very long time. Beowulf gets to the bottom where he gets attacked by Grendel's mother and seemingly dragged into what they call her hull. And it's this cave underwater that is open air, sort of an air pocket. And it almost seems like Grendel's mother has brought him here so that they can fight on fairer ground. That's never confirmed, but it's one of those weird things where it's just like, I'm not sure why we didn't grapple in the water. Beowulf can apparently breathe fine since it took him a while to get down here, but we're in the underground hull. Much stuff is down there, like the body of Grendel, a lot of old treasure, things like that. And Beowulf and Grendel's mother go at it. Beowulf has a harder time here, though. First, he actually tries to use his sword against her, but it turns out her skin's so tough that it ends up just blunting and denting the blade. So Beowulf throws his sword away and tries to grapple hand to hand with her. But even here, she's actually an equal match for him, or even a little stronger than he is. And we're told that it's only thanks to his mail shirt that he survives any of this, because Grendel's mother seems to have really big nails, like claws, right? And thankfully he's wearing his mail shirt, so he does in fact survive, long enough to realize that there is a giant sword nearby which he seizes and uses to kill Grendel's mother. What follows is rather interesting, because we get a little information about what's happening in the world above. 9 hours have passed, and most of Hrothgar's men are sure that Beowulf is dead. So they actually, with heavy hearts, head back to the hull. Beowulf's companions stay, not that they have any real hope that Beowulf is alive, but it is their place to remain there until they get a sign one way or the other. Meanwhile, Beowulf has found the body of Grendel, and he's actually taken Grendel's head off, along with the hilt of the sword he used to kill Grendel's mother. The blade has melted. She apparently had some poisonous blood. So, with the hilt of the sword and Grendel's head, Beowulf swims back up, to the excitement of all his companions and the men of the hall when they show up with the head and the hilt, and everyone looks at this grisly giant Grendel head. Yeah, we actually end with, like, all of them gazing at the head. It's a little weird. You done, Tiggies? You done rubbing yourself on my tripod? I don't think she's done. Yeah, I think the big thing we have to talk about right now is the cycle of violence we're seeing happen here. Because, well, why is it wrong that Grendel's mother does this? Or is it wrong that Grendel's mother does this? Beowulf does tell us that it is better to avenge your fallen companions than to mourn them, which is actually what we see Grendel's mother doing as well. She comes in, maybe not to kill a bunch of people. Will you not lie on my notes, please? But at least to retrieve her son's arm. She is, in fact, doing the correct thing. And it's a cycle of violence we then see continued. Beowulf goes and avenges the loss of the Thane that was killed by Grendel's mother. You can see the problem we've run into. It's a feud that we've already heard noted before. Beowulf's father started a feud like this, and it was blood money that ultimately finished it off. But there's a few things different here. First and foremost, one of the problems might be that Grendel's mother is, well, a woman. Now, in some places this isn't so much of a problem. There are plenty of stories where feuds have been taken up by the female counterparts when male family members are no longer here, usually because the feud has killed most of them. And since Grendel's mother was the only surviving kinsman of Grendel, this seems relatively normal. It's a little weird, but even the wording here seems to support this a little bit. There's a point where Beowulf calls Grendel's mother he several times in talking about going to find him and kill him. Now, this could be that Beowulf's simply not paying attention, and he's simply seeing the cycle of violence picked up by the nearest kinsman, which would usually be a he. But kinsman here is also a male term, so he might be referring to he simply as kinsman, and it doesn't really matter that the kinsman in question is actually female. So maybe Grendel's mother avenging the death isn't a problem because he's the mother. Mother is all that's left. Some other problems might be that we're not seeing humans here. We are told that Grendel and his mother, well, are shaped kind of like humans, and Grendel's mother is shaped like a female. We're kind of told that they're a different creature. They're a line of Cain, but we've also got relations to giants here, which are fundamentally different from humans. So the idea that they could participate in this well-known human thing that is accepted for humans to do is very different. You can see also the difficulty of that, because I'm using humans here to refer as humans, but if we change something like people and refer to different humans as not human, well, we run into that problem. The fact is that both Grendel and his mother do descend from Cain, and Cain was human. So, while we've got the idea that they're monstrous, we might actually be wrong in that idea. So, whether or not Grendel's mother can participate in this avenging, well, maybe the problem isn't that she's a different creature. She's a woman, she's a different creature. Is it because Grendel was the bad guy? That might actually be the problem. You see, Grendel shouldn't be avenged. Grendel's the bad guy. Now, there are points that maybe you got into a bar fight and one of you killed the other, and then you can see vengeance there, even if that person started the bar fight. Or maybe someone kills somebody over an insult. Vengeance there because it was just an insult. Grendel, well, it's not just an insult or starting a fight. Grendel has spent 12 years terrorizing this place every night, and he's killed multiple people. He is clearly in the wrong, and can't be avenged because of it. He's the bad guy who's killed so many people that his death doesn't even really make up for the loss of life that was there. So coming in and killing somebody in response is actually the wrong thing to do. But you can understand why Grendel's mother did it anyways. She's his mother. She's never going to view Grendel as the bad guy here. She seems to be just as upset about these people coming in as he is. And ultimately, we're also seeing only two of a kind. There is no mention of a father, and in fact, nobody knows what Grendel's father was. So Grendel's mother might now fully be on her own. That idea, well, it might counterbalance the idea that Grendel was in the wrong and thus can't be avenged. But it does explain why Beowulf says that vengeance for the Thane is the proper course of action. Grendel was the monster. He killed the monster. The monster shouldn't be avenged. So the Thane killed in that vengeance deserves to be avenged. But you also see the problem we've run into there. Where does it end? Well, usually the vengeance cycle ends in two different ways. Either we actually wipe out one or both sides of the avenging groups, or ultimately we pay blood money. And we've actually seen both of these happen already. In the history that we get about Beowulf's father, he starts a blood feud, and Hrothgar pays the blood money to end the feud. And this is basically the idea that you're paying enough money to make the death. Well, it's not going to make it better, and it's certainly going to make it not have happened. But the idea is that you're taking care of the surviving members like that person would have been able to take care of them. Blood money has taken on a negative term, right? When you're paid blood money, that's usually not a good thing. You're hearing 30 pieces of silver given to Judas to betray Jesus. You're not hearing the idea that one side is taking responsibility for the other side by trying to take care of them, which seems to actually be what's happening here. Our terminology has made it a little negative. But we've also seen that decimation of one side. That actually happened in the lay that we discussed last video. And unfortunately, it's happened here too. We are ultimately seeing the end of a family, and possibly the end of a single species, if Grendel and Grendel's mother are two of a kind. We've wiped them out now. And this feud will actually end right here, simply because there's no one left to even try and avenge Grendel and his mother. They were the only ones left. It's a little sad, but ultimately that's what's happened. And it is a question for us whether or not we dig deeper into this. For the most part, hearing this story, you're supposed to be proud of Beowulf for defeating the monster. But the question is, how much of a monster does he actually become? This entire battle with Grendel's mother is particularly gruesome when you realize that the situations have been flipped. When he was battling Grendel, Beowulf was in Hrothgar's hall, and Grendel was in fact the invading monster. Well, here we seem to be in Grendel's mother's hall. Beowulf is now the invader. And in fact, the narration plays this up. He's called a hall guest here, which is, well, it should make us just as uncomfortable as Grendel eating and drinking in the hall of Hrothgar. This is especially true, then, when Beowulf acts violently against his host, and does so by stealing from her to do it. The sword that he uses against her is one from her own hoard. In a lot of ways, it would kind of be like if Hrothgar gave Beowulf a sword and Beowulf turned around and hit him with it. Just said, ta-da, I'm king now. It's a twisted version of that, but it is something we have to be aware of, especially since this is a feud that is somehow allowed, yet also twisted within this society. Ultimately, Beowulf also perhaps acts unfairly. When he had his battle with Grendel, he was full-on boasting about the fact that because Grendel doesn't use any weapons, he won't either. This goes out the window when it comes to fighting Grendel's mother, and in fact, the only way Beowulf survives is because he has all the technology. He's wearing his mail shirt, which helps protect him from Grendel's mother's claws. His technology and his use of it here is what saves him. Maybe not the sword he brought, but certainly his willingness to pick one up and use it. He does try grappling with Grendel's mother, but only after the sword proves ineffective. So what about Grendel's mother doesn't get the same respect from Beowulf that Grendel did? Is it because she's a woman? Or are we seeing a problem with Beowulf where the entire situation's been twisted to the point where he's invaded and attacked a woman in her own hall? Especially since last section told us that Grendel's mother did less damage because she has a maiden strength versus a warrior's. Beowulf doesn't look like the good guy here. He kind of looks like the jerk who's just trashing the place for fun. But that's allowed, because it is this cycle. It's a cycle that Grendel's mother has invited on herself by insisting on avenging her own son, and this is the end expected, especially since Grendel and Grendel's mother are different from humans. The likelihood that Grendel's mother would accept blood money, well, she doesn't really have use of it, does she? The hoard itself is twisted, and we'll see this even more when we hit the end of Beowulf, because it's not being used. And ultimately we see it destroyed by Grendel's mother through her blood, simply because, well, she's a monster. She doesn't interact with society the way anybody else would. But the fact that we are seeing this twisted version of Grendel attacking in Beowulf should have us concerned. Beowulf is actually becoming more and more like the monster of the story, and we're going to see this really clearly in the last monster he faces. The other thing we need to talk about is the fact that, well, the trophy Beowulf takes is a bit weird. He's been sent to get Grendel's mother, but the trophy he takes is Grendel's head. Is it because Grendel's the bigger, badder beast? Is it because Grendel's male? Is it because Grendel was the original problem? There's actually no proof that Beowulf presents that he's killed Grendel's mother, except the story and the assumption that if she went to save Grendel's arm, she wouldn't allow his head to be taken. Is Beowulf treating Grendel's mother kindly by not taking her head? Or is he disregarding the problem he had with her own strength, and her own position in the story as the hall owner and, well, gift giver, by simply focusing on her son rather than herself? Unfortunately, these are never answers we're going to be able to have because we don't have the full context of the narration. Are we seeing a society that respects women in such a way that their bodily togetherness is respected even in death? Or are we seeing, again, the rejection of womanhood and the focus on masculinity here? It could go either way. Are you enjoying yourself, Tiggies? She loves it when I read. So I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.